I never imagined I would find myself in this situation, especially when it came to my own family. But here I am, struggling to navigate the complexities of betrayal, hurt, and forgiveness. My name is Olivia, 28 years, and this is the story of how my sister, Mia, and my boyfriend, James, ruined my trust and my peace, and how it has changed everything, including the most important event of my life, my wedding. Growing up, Mia and I were close. As kids, we shared a room in our modest suburban home, whispering late into the night about our dreams and secrets. Mia, always the more outgoing one, had a talent for art and music that shone brightly. I was the opposite, quiet, studious, and often lost in books. But despite the differences in our personalities, we always had each other. Our parents, William, 55 years, and Sophia, 50 years, taught us the value of family above all else. They were our anchors, and even in our fights, we knew we were supposed to stick together no matter what. Our father worked tirelessly as a car mechanic, putting in long hours to provide for us, while our mother worked part-time, managing the household and taking care of us. They both worked hard, teaching Mia and me the importance of loyalty and perseverance, and how crucial it was to stand by each other, no matter the circumstances. It was during my college years that things started to shift. I met James, a 28-year-old senior at my college, in my sophomore year. James was intelligent, personable, and charming, with a love for classic novels that mirrored my own. He was popular, someone everyone gravitated toward, but it was our shared passion for books that initially drew us together. We spent countless hours in coffee shops, discussing our favorite authors, ideas, and stories. It was the kind of connection that I believed would last a lifetime. James became my first serious boyfriend, and I quickly fell for him. It wasn't long before we made plans for the future. After graduation, James chose to stay in town and work at a local publishing business, while I began building my career in media marketing. We were solid together, navigating the ups and downs of early adulthood, facing challenges like job changes, financial struggles, and the heartbreak of losing our beloved childhood dog. Through it all, we stuck by each other's side, and I couldn't have been more certain that we would one day marry and build a life together. Meanwhile, Mia chose a different path. She decided not to attend college, instead following her passion for art. She worked a series of jobs to support herself, all the while trying to establish a name for herself in the local art community. I admired her resilience, even if our parents were less than thrilled by her decision. While I pursued stability through my education and career, Mia was chasing a dream that seemed a little more uncertain, but no less important to her. It was around this time that James and Mia began to form a bond. They hit it off immediately, sharing an interest in indie music and abstract art, regularly engaging in passionate discussions about new art exhibitions and underground bands. As happy as I was that they got along so well, I never suspected that this friendly connection would evolve into something far darker. James and I had been together for 5 years, and by that point, we had weathered the early struggles of adulthood. We had been through it all, and our relationship was stronger than ever. We even started discussing marriage in casual terms, researching engagement rings together, and talking about the future we imagined for ourselves. We lived in a cozy apartment, just the two of us, and life seemed like it was finally coming together. Mia, on the other hand, continued to face difficulties in her own life. She moved from job to job, often staying with us when she didn't have a place to stay. James and I, always supportive, never hesitated to help her out financially or let her crash on our couch when she needed to. I didn't mind. After all, she was my sister, and family was supposed to help each other. But this support, which I thought was an expression of love and care, would soon be overshadowed by a betrayal that would shake the foundation of everything I knew. One rainy Monday in May changed everything. I had a major work presentation coming up and realized I had forgotten some important files on my home laptop. Since Mia was staying with us that week, I texted her asking if she could send me the files. She agreed, and I didn't give it a second thought. After my presentation, which I thought had gone well, I opened my inbox to retrieve the files from Mia. But something was wrong. There was an email thread in my inbox that Mia had accidentally left open, a thread that I never should have seen. I'm shocked when I read the contents of the email. It was an exchange between James and Mia, filled with intimate details, confessions, and plans for secret meetings. As I read, I felt the floor beneath me shift. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could barely catch my breath. It was clear. James and Mia had been having an affair for 5 months. I couldn't believe it. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, and I was falling into an abyss. I immediately left work early, my mind racing as I made my way home. When I walked into our apartment, James was there, and I didn't waste time. I confronted him, and at first, he tried to downplay the situation. He told me it was nothing serious, just a bit of flirtation between them. But as I revealed more of what I had read, his excuses crumbled. He finally admitted to the affair, claiming it had started innocently. Late-night conversations when I was at work, a shared interest in art that had spiraled into something neither of them had planned. He told me that he never wanted to hurt me, that he was confused, that he didn't know what had happened. But it didn't matter. I couldn't stand hearing his excuses any longer. I asked him to leave, but confronting Mia was the hardest part. When I arrived at her apartment, my hands shook as I knocked on the door. When she opened it, I saw the expression on her face. The guilt, the shame. She knew. She didn't try to deny it or offer any excuses like James. Instead, she looked me in the eyes and told me that she had fallen in love with him. She said it wasn't planned, that it just happened, but she couldn't resist their feelings for each other. The pain was unbearable. In the months that followed, I felt as though I was drowning in a sea of sorrow and rage. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with James, crashing on a friend's couch as I tried to put the shattered pieces of my life together. I buried myself in work, taking on extra assignments to keep my mind occupied. I cut off all contact with both James and Mia, blocking their numbers and social media profiles. Our parents were devastated. They tried to mediate, to convince me to forgive Mia, but I couldn't even imagine being in the same room as her. The betrayal was still fresh, the wounds too deep to heal. They eventually stopped pressuring me, but I could see the sadness in their eyes whenever the subject came up. It wasn't until nearly a year later, after a lot of therapy and self-reflection, that I started to feel ready to open my heart again. That's when I met Michael, a kind-hearted man I met at a charity fundraiser for an animal shelter. He was everything I needed: compassionate, understanding, and respectful of my past. Slowly but surely, we fell in love. 2 years into our relationship, Michael proposed to me on a beautiful morning hike, and it felt right. Planning our wedding was exciting, but it also brought back memories of pain I had long tried to suppress. Everything was going smoothly until my dad brought up inviting Mia. He said she was still family and should be there for my wedding. Just hearing that made my stomach churn. How could I celebrate such a joyful day with someone who had caused me so much pain? When I refused to invite Mia, my parents reacted harshly. They called me petty, accused me of being unwilling to move forward, and even threatened not to attend if Mia wasn't invited. Some relatives joined in, criticizing me for separating the family. But I stood my ground. Mia's betrayal had shattered me, and I was determined to protect the life I was now building with Michael. Was I wrong to refuse to invite my sister to my wedding? That question lingered in my mind as the pressure from my parents and relatives mounted. But I knew I couldn't let their expectations override my own healing. I had worked too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't about to let the past ruin my future. My parents had promised to speak with the relatives who had been making me feel guilty about not inviting Mia to my wedding. They agreed to explain the situation to them and make it clear that their attempts to pressure me were inappropriate. I had been carrying this burden for weeks, and knowing that my parents were finally taking charge of this issue gave me a sense of relief. After this emotional conversation, I felt as though a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Though my feelings of anger and hurt were far from resolved, for the first time since the ordeal began, I felt truly heard and understood by my parents. It was a monumental step forward for me. Later that evening, I shared everything with Michael, who had stayed out of the conversation with my parents to give us the space to sort through our emotions. When I told him about the discussion and the commitment my parents had made to stop pressuring me, he was incredibly supportive. He comforted me while I cried, a mixture of relief and lingering sorrow washing over me. He suggested that we take a weekend getaway to a nearby beach town to decompress, take our minds off everything, and refocus on our wedding planning. The weekend we spent there was exactly what I needed. We walked along the shore, enjoyed the tranquility of the ocean, and spent time planning the final details of our wedding. We chose our wedding cake, a rich chocolate cake with raspberry filling, and finalized our celebration playlist. We even spent time practicing our first dance under the starlit sky, enjoying the beauty of the moment and the bond we shared. This weekend not only gave us the chance to focus on the joyous occasion ahead, but it also deepened my appreciation for Michael. Through everything, he had been a constant source of support. He always prioritized my feelings and was willing to help me through the most difficult decisions. I realized with certainty that I was marrying the right person. With the wedding less than 2 months away, I began to look forward to it with excitement rather than dread. I was ready to celebrate our love surrounded by those who genuinely cared about us, but I still struggled with the thought of Mia's absence. Although the pain of her betrayal would never completely fade, I knew that this decision was the right one for my mental health and happiness. A few weeks after, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from Mia. It arrived in the mail, an unassuming envelope that sat on our kitchen counter for days before I could bring myself to open it. I felt a mix of emotions when I saw her handwriting on the envelope. Mia, ever the voice of reason, suggested that I read it, as it could bring some closure, even if I decided not to respond to her. After several days of hesitation, I finally gathered the courage to open the letter on a quiet Sunday morning. It was several pages long, filled with Mia's trademark loopy handwriting. As I read through the letter, I could almost hear her voice, and the memories of our childhood came flooding back. Late-night talks, secrets shared, and the special bond we once had. Mia began the letter by acknowledging the immense grief she had caused me. She took full responsibility for her actions and made no excuses. She wrote about the downward spiral her life had taken after James left her, and how she had turned to alcohol to cope with her shame and guilt. She spoke about how depression had plagued her long before the affair with James, but after the betrayal, it worsened significantly. What struck me the most was her revelation that she had entered rehab. Mia had been in a treatment facility for the past 6 months, focusing on her sobriety and mental well-being. She described the grueling process of therapy, confronting her demons, and working to rebuild her life. As part of her recovery, Mia explained that she had made it a goal to reach out to people she had harmed, and her letter was her way of attempting to make amends. She made it clear that she was not seeking forgiveness, nor did she expect me to invite her to the wedding. Her purpose in writing was solely to apologize and let me know that she was working on becoming a better person. She ended the letter with a memory from our childhood, a story of how I had stood up for her against bullies at school. Mia confessed that she had always admired my tenacity and honesty, and that betraying me was her greatest regret. When I finished reading, I was left feeling conflicted. I wanted to feel an overwhelming sense of forgiveness, but instead, I was consumed by a mix of anger, sadness, and faint traces of the sisterly affection we once shared. I knew I needed time to process my emotions, so I decided to take a few days before deciding what to do next. Michael was incredibly patient during this time, offering his support while I deliberated. After much reflection and numerous conversations with Michael, I decided to meet Mia in person. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in town where we could talk without interruptions. Seeing her again after 3 years was surreal. She had changed. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, but there was a noticeable peace about her that hadn't been there before. Our conversation began awkwardly, with pauses and unsure words. However, as we spoke, the tension slowly began to dissipate. Mia reiterated everything she had written in her letter, her voice breaking with emotion as she apologized again for the pain she had caused me. She told me more about her journey in rehab, the therapy she had undergone, and the work she had done to understand the reasons behind her actions. To my surprise, Mia showed me a journal in which she had been writing letters to me throughout her recovery. She had no intention of sending them, but wanted to express her feelings and thoughts on paper. She read excerpts from some of the letters, and hearing her unedited emotions, raw and vulnerable, was eye-opening. It was clear that she had done a lot of soul-searching, and I couldn't deny that the woman sitting before me was trying to change for the better. The meeting was emotional. We both shed tears as we talked about the past and the pain we had both endured. Mia shared how her relationship with James had crumbled shortly after I discovered their affair, their bond collapsing under the weight of guilt and resentment. She had not spoken to him since. By the end of the meeting, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The anger that had burned inside me for years began to fade, replaced by a mixture of sadness, relief, and cautious hope. After much reflection and further discussions with Michael, I decided not to invite Mia to the wedding. It was simply too soon. I wanted to enjoy my special day without the stress and emotional baggage that her presence might bring. However, I agreed to take small steps toward rebuilding our relationship, starting with occasional text messages and perhaps meeting for coffee in the future. Mia accepted my decision with grace and understanding. She even sent Michael and me a modest gift, a hand-painted letter wishing us happiness in our marriage. It reminded me of the homemade birthday cards she used to make for me when we were younger. The gesture, though small, was meaningful, and I appreciated it more than I expected. Our journey of healing has only just begun. There are still days when the pain of betrayal resurfaces, reminding me of the deep wound that was inflicted. But for the first time in 4 years, I am cautiously optimistic about the future of my relationship with Mia. The wedding preparations are in full swing, and despite Mia's absence, I'm at peace with my decision. My special day will be about celebrating the love that Michael and I share, and looking forward to the future we are building together. We're talking about starting a family soon. Whatever problems come our way, I'm confident that we will confront them together, stronger for having weathered the storm. I've learned a lot about setting boundaries, self-care, and the power of forgiveness, not for the benefit of the other person, but for my own peace of mind. Looking back, I recognize that the healing process isn't linear. There are good days and bad days, moments of progress and moments of uncertainty, but I'm pleased of how far I've gone and enthusiastic about what the future holds with Michael. To anyone in a similar situation, remember that it is acceptable to prioritize your personal well-being. Healing takes time, and you don't have to forgive somebody until you're ready to do so. Trust your intuition, surround yourself with helpful people, and do not be hesitant to seek professional help if necessary. Finally, I want to say that you should not betray such a person who trusts you a lot. Trust cannot be reestablished,